Now we're on the top of Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis, and the Gemara continues to go through the cases and the psak halacha of Rabbi Yochanan. Who is he coming to exclude? Chotzer. According to Rabbi Yochanan, Chotzer is only kovas after Gemar Malach, not beforehand. Lafuke min Rabbi Yaakov. He's excluding the halacha of Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov holds that Chotzer is kovas lemaser even before Gemar Malach. It's not. We learned in the Mishnah in the third parak of Masros. Hamavir te'enim bechatzero liktos. He is transporting figs in his chotzer for the purpose of flattening them out in the sun and making what we call ktzios out of them, because after the ktzios, as we said before, they pound it, they pulverize it, and then they have this round press and they make it into igule dvela. According to the Tanakama, we'll see Rabbi Yaakov is the dissenting view. There is a p'tur of maser, and therefore anyone's allowed to eat an achilas haroy. And the reason for this is because chotzer cannot be kovas before Gemar Malach. However, the Beitza quotes the dissenting view of Rabbi Yaakov Mechayev that these te'enim are chayev in maser because chotzer kovas lamaser afilu kodem shenigmar malach. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda poter. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda goes back to the shita of the Tanakama, and he's poter. Again, if we were learning the Mishnah inside in Masros, we'd have to come to the conclusion why Rabbi Yossi had to add what he had. Why didn't he just pass like the Chachamim? But in any event, Rabbi Yochanan is passing like the Chachamim and like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, apparently, that you're potter against Rabbi Yaakov. Next, Truma. Rabbi Yochanan rules that Truma is not kovas lemaser before Gemar Malach lafuke mider Rabbi Eliezer. And this is against Rabbi Eliezer. In the Mishnah there in Masros, in the second parak, Peros shetramon ajlo nigmar malachton. He was mafresh truma from Peros before Gemar Malacha. Rabbi Eliezer oser lechol me'emen aroy. Rabbi Eliezer requires that he be mafresh the Masros, and he cannot even eat a temporary kind of achilas haroy because the ma'isa frash's truma is kovel maser, even with regard to Peros shlo nigmar Melachton. Chachamim matirim. Chacham allow you to eat achilas haroy because truma and afrash's truma is not kovas lemaser b'perish lo nigmar malach. Rabbi Yochanan is teaching me that the halach is not like Rabbi Eliezer, but rather like Chacham. Now the Gemara at this point is going to speak about mekach, about purchasing peros. Now, normally, when you purchase peros from what's called an Amoritz, someone who has no experience with Talmidei Chachamim, he has no exposure to these scholars, then there were a number of Amoritz, I can't tell you how many, maybe 10%, 20% of the population of Amoritz that were not makpid on Afroshas Mas. And therefore, it's called Dmai. You go out into the shuk, into the marketplace, you buy fruits from an Amoritz, and it has the status of Dmai, unless it has a, you go to the Shuk Machne Yehuda, you'll see sometimes the hechsher of the Rabbanim. Now the Gemara goes back to Rabbi Yochanan. Mikach, according to Rabbi Yochanan, purchasing is not a kovel maser unless it was already nigmar malachta maser. And Rabbi Yochanan is coming to teach me that halacha is like the Beitza. Kedisanya, like we learned in the Beitza, halokeach te'enim yama oretz. A person goes into a store of an amoretz. The seller has no great connection to the Rabbanim. He wasn't Mishamish Talmidei Chachamim. And the question is whether or not these fruits are Dmai. So the Beitza says, "B'makom sherov b'nei adam darsin, ochel mehem aroy uma'aser uma'asron Demai. What does this mean? Rov b'nei adam dar. So we're trying to establish when we purchase these figs whether the status of the figs is kodem gemar malacha or after gemar malacha, and it all depends on darsin. Darsin means when they stample on top of the figs in order to flatten them out. It means that they want to make them into ketzios, make them into those round pounded igule tveil. But now we have rov b'nei adam darsin. We've identified this location as one in which most people do drisa. They want to make it into ketzios. It means that you can assume that those te'enim are before gmar malach, and therefore the Beitza allows you to eat achilas haroi. You're not allowed to eat achilas keva. And then ma'asrim demai, when they get into the hands of the person who wants to eat them, and it's already now after gmar malacha, because the person who eats them, he purchases them after gmar malacha, or he himself is gomer the malacha, is then he has to be mafresh masa, and that's called demai. And again, he's only going to be mafresh the masa, like the din of peiros sheniknim that are bought from an amoritz. He doesn't have to be mafresh truma gedola, because we assume that amoritz would probably, even if he doesn't mafresh maser, he would definitely be mafresh truma gedola. Otherwise, there's an iser kares involved, or misa b'dei shamayim. All right. In any event, we see that you're allowed to eat aroi from mekach, that which you purchase. Mekach is a kovela masa. You're allowed to eat achilas aroi, but that's because it's before gmar malach, because rov b'nei adam dors maminot flas. The Gemara now says we should derive three different conclusions from this brayso. Number one, shma mino mekach eino kovas elo b'davar shenigmar malachta. Fine. That we saw already. Shma mino number two, rov hamiaretz ma'asrene. It's only a chumrah that the Rabbana required being mafresh from peiros of an amoritz masros, and ushma mino. And finally, the Or Sameach, by the way, has a whole explanation on this Gemara, and he says, Ma chidush bazeh. I mean, what's the Gemara? The Gemara has to derive a new chiddush, like it's a radical. You discovered America. We know that rov hamiaretz ma'asrene, and that explains almost all the dinim of Tmai. The entire Masechet Tmai is based on rov hamiaretz ma'asrene. And he has a very complicated shita here, the Rambam, that if you buy peiros after gmar malacha, then you're not chayiv in maser, only midrabanan. If you buy peiros before gmar malacha, then after the gmar malacha, you be chayiv maser min haTorah. Anyway, based on the sheet of the Rambam, unique sheet of the Rambam, he explains why the second shmamino is a radical chiddush. Ushmamino, and the third shmamino is ma'asrun by me'ami ha'aretz hafilu b'davar shelo nigmar malachta. So it's even if he purchased these fruits from the amoretz, these peiros that were designated to become ketzios, so it's before gmar malacha, and even though he doesn't have to be mafresh truma gedola, he only has to be mafresh masa, because it has the status of peiros demai. And we're not going to say that these peiros, for sure, absolutely, definitely, are tevel lamasa, and there was no afrasha, based on the logic that the amoritz would not be mafresh masa before gmar malacha, because this Tan is of the opinion that ma'asrin peiroseim lifnei gmar malachta, that in fact it is common practice to be mafresh maser even before gmar malacha, and that was the minhag in those times, and therefore we could be kol lahakel, we could be lenient and assume that these peiros have the status of demai. The Gemara now continues to explain why Rabbi Yochanan had to tell me that the halacha is that mekach is not kovea lemasa before gmar malacha. Lafuki mehaded tanan, to exclude the Tanakama of a Mishnah in the second parak of Masas Hamachlif Peiros im Chavero. He swaps his fruits that have not been subject to Maser yet, and they do a barter exchange on their Peiros. and this is considered like a mekach. They both have te'enim, and it matters not what they are exchanging. Zeh lechol v'zeh lechol, both of them want to eat the te'enim. Zeh liktos, one wants to dry them and make tzios. V'zeh liktos, and the other one also wants to make tzios. Or zeh lechol v'zeh liktos, or one of these two intends to eat them, the other intends to make tzios out of them. In all these different scenarios, chayav. Each one of these two machlifim are chayav in maseh. And even in a case where he purchased them liktzos, so there's no gemar malacha, this kind of kama holds that mekach is kovel maser even before gemar malacha. However, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees in that Mishnah in the second parak of Masechet. Yomi, and he says, lechol chayav, if he purchases these figs for the purpose of eating them, then he's chayav in maser, because as far as he's concerned, there's already gemar malacha. But liktos, if he's buying them to make tzios, which means he's going to dry them in the sun, so there's no gemar malacha, patur, he's exempt from maser, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that liktzosan means it's before gemar malacha. He himself intends to dry them, the buyer himself. So Rabbi Yehuda apparently holds that mekach is not kovei maser in the case of kodim shenigmar malachta. Rabbi Yochanan wants to tell us that we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda against the Tanakh. Hadron alecha perek hamif. Now the fifth perek is called Mashilin, but the truth is we're going to offer at least another 3 and maybe even 5 different names of this perek. What is this perek about? It's about tircha. We don't want you to do too much work on Yont, and how much more so not on Shabbos. However, mashilin peros derech aruba b'yont. Aruba is a skylight on top, on his roof, and it's very easy for him to send his peros down from the aruba to the bottom floor. If, on the other hand, he has walls around this roof and he's got windows in the walls, he's not allowed to send them through the windows because that requires what's called a tircha yisera, and that did not matter on Yontif. So Mashilin Peres Derech Aruba b'Yontif, he's got fruits that were spread out on his roof in order to dry them, and now he sees that it's about to rain. You know, they started already asking for rain. It was after Zayin Cheshvan, and they were Mavakesh in Tfilas Geshamim. So they allow him to do this minimum amount of tircha of saving his peros from the hefsed, the loss of the rains, by sending them down through this skylight in a downward motion. Keep in mind the downward motion. That's really the key for our purposes today. Avolo b'Shabbos, but even this minimum tircha of Mashilin Derech Aruba was not permitted on Shabbos because we're not going to allow tircha on Shabbos. It's an interesting sugya unto itself. I mean, the Moged Avram and Siman Shin Lamed Ches paskins that if he needs the peros for eating on Shabbos, and he's afraid to leave them up on the roof, they'll get mitunafim, then even on Shabbos, he's allowed to send them through the skylight. Machasim peros b'kelim b'nei adelef, and we're not sure if we're talking about Yontif exclusively or even on Shabbos, but in this case, he's simply covering his peros with various kinds of cloths or utensils in order to prevent them from getting wet by the geshamim. And the word delef means that he's got crevices in his ceiling, so the water of the rains is falling through these crevices, and it could destroy his peros. So he's allowed to do this, and this is not considered a tircha shelo l'tzorech. It might look like it, but it's not. And v'chein kadei yayin v'kadei shemen, he's allowed to cover them b'fnei adla, in order that there shouldn't be any kilkul. V'nosnin kli tachas hadelef b'Shabbos. Even on Shabbos, you're allowed to take a kli in order to receive the rainwater that's seeping through these crevices in his roof. The Gemara says we learned to the base measures Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nosson. There is a machlokas, so to speak, but it's not really a machlokas. Exactly what the proper gears of the Mishnah is. Chad Toni, one has the way we have it in our Mishnah, mashilin, but Chad Toni mashchilin. So the name of this chapter, according to one Tana, is Perek Hamachshchilin. And the Gemara says there's no difference between the two. Omar Mar Zutra man detani mashilin lo mishtabish man deshamar detani mashchilin lo mishtabish. Both the words mashilin and mashchilin are appropriate. And either way, they mean the same thing, which is called hashpala, derech, mala, lemata. Okay? Meaning to bring something down from on top, that could be called mashilin or mashchilin. And now we're going to go through a biblical etymological study of these words. It says, Ki yishal zeisecha, this is in the curses, and it says that the zeisim that come down from the olive trees will fall onto the ground even before they ripen on the trees. We see clearly that hashola is a language of hashpola milamal lamata. Manditani mashchilin lo mishtamish disnan. The Mishnah tells us in Bechoros, this Mishnah is identifying a mum on a bechar, such that now we can shecht it and the Kohen is allowed to eat the meat of the bechar. Normally a bechar without a mum is kodesh l'mizbeach. And amongst the list of various mumim, we have something called sarua. Sarua means that one of its limbs is much larger than another limb. We have shachul and we have kasul. These are all included under the generic category called sarua. What is shachul? The Mishnah says, "Shenishmita yerecha." The thigh is dislocated. And what's kasul? She'echad mi'archosav gvoa michaverta. That one of the thighs is higher than the other one. In other words, at the point of chibur, where the thigh attaches to the body of the animal, there is a situation of shachul. We see that the word shachul or hashchasa is hashpola milamala lamata, meaning that the yerech, the thigh, is down. One thigh is normal, it's up, and the other is down. So you see that the word shchila means down. I'm going to add another two words that could substitute for our mashilin in the Mishnah. Manditani mashirin lo mishtamish, or manditani mashchirin lo mishtamish. Not only that, I'm going to add even another word, manditani menashirin lo mishtamish. And now the Gemara explains. Manditani mashilin lo mishtamish. This mashirin lo mishtam mashirin lo mishtam mashirin is based on a Mishnah Nazir on Daf Mem Beis. A Nazir is not allowed to cut his hair. And according to Rabbi Yishmael, Nazir lo yachaf rosha ba'adoma. They used to have a certain kind of dirt that was lacha udveka. It was moist, and it's like has a devek kind of propensity. And he shouldn't use that as a shampoo, mipnei shemashir es haseyar, because it removes the hair. So for those people in my age bracket who want to keep their hair on, they should be careful about what kind of shampoo they use. And in Nazir, says Rabbi Yishmael, has to be very careful. The Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Yishmael because they hold this as a davar she'eino miskaven. In any event, manditani mashchirin lo mishtabesh, based on a Mishnah in the 13th parak of Kalim. Kalim, by the way, which deals with Tumah V'Tara, is one of the largest Masechtas in Chas in Mishnayos. Whoa. Anyway, it says hashachar. Shachar is what's it called? A raisin. How do you like that? I remember that word. I probably haven't heard it in ages. Anyway, a razor is considered makabel tum. Now, sometimes the razor has handles, and the handles are removable handles. In zug shel saparim, we have scissors that are made of a connection of two knives. Two knives connected make a scissors. But you can also take it apart. He says, even if he took apart the base yad, the handle, or that which connects the two blades, tmeim, they are makabel tumah, because even after nechlaku, each one has a malacha b'fnei atzma. You could use it even without the handles, or you could use each knife separate from the other knife. But the word ta'ar, razor, is called shachar. Why is it called shachar? Because it takes down the hair from on top to the bottom. Lachshir ashpola. On the Yomi Mashirin, because of a mission at the end of Shabbos. Michin Sharu Kalov, his garden fell into the water, B'mayim, Mahalach Bahem, he's allowed to walk, and they will get air dried. Vienna Choshesh, he doesn't have to worry that people suspect him that he washed his clothes on Shabbos. Inami, I'll give you another case of a Mishnah, in this case, the fourth Perkapeya, where the Neshira means it came down. May this nan of Mishnah and Peira, as we said, Hazel Leket on no share Shas K'tir, that which falls to the ground when he's harvesting. Tanan, we learned to that Mishnah, Mashilin Peiros Derech Aruba beyond. You're allowed to send down the Peiros through the skylight on Yont. Ad Kama. At what point do we finally say there's such a voluminous amount of Peiros that it's already considered a Tircha Yisera? What's the shear? How much do we allow of Peiros to send down? Omer Rab Zera, Omer Rav Asi, the Amrli, Omer Rav Asi, Omer Rab Yochanan. Ki osa, we should have an analogy to a Mishnah at the end of Shabbos, Shechaninu. Let's say you're expecting guests, and you want to make room for them, and you have an otzar, you have a storage room, and it's full of barrels of, let's say, wine, or perhaps of called, how do you say Tevin? I always forget the word of straw. He's got barrels of straw, and he wants to clean them all out on Shabbos in order to make room for his guests. 4 or 5 large barrels. Because let's say if you don't have orchid, maybe you have talmidim, and they need a place to sit in the base medrash. We're allowed to clear out 4 or 5. And so too, with regard to Hasholos Peres, Derech Haruba on Yontif, we're allowed to be mashil up to 4 or 5 kupos. The Gemara there in Shabbos is going to discuss why 4 or 5. If 5, then certainly 4. Anyway, V'dil Mashani Hasam, there's no fair comparison. The Gemara is going to find many, many distinctions between the halacha of Mefanim Arba V'chamish Kupos B'Shabbos and our case of Mashil. First of all, Shiny Hasam the Ika Bittul Beis Medrash. Maybe for the sake of the Talmidim or Orchim, the covet of the Orchim, therefore we were more lenient, but maybe for the sake of Hefsei, because he's afraid the raids on Yontif will ruin his payrolls and he's going to get involved in such tircha, we wouldn't be so laid back about it, so flexible and lenient. They would not allow such a tircha yisera of 4 or 5 kupos. Inami, I can give you another distinction. Why is it mutter them mishum Shabbos chamira v'lo zuli? People have a mentality that we're not going to be mezalzel in Shabbos. Aval yontif to kill v'yazil zuli. The attitude towards yontif relatively is zilzul, because it's not as severe and as stringent as Shabbos. Is therefore, if we allow him to do the hasholah and this tircha yisera 4 or 5 kupos, he'll come to be mezalzel in Shabbos klal lo. Again, the girsa here is mistaken. It shouldn't say klal lo, but rather the girsa should be avol yontif tekil afilu tuva nam. Wait a minute. No, that doesn't make any sense. Aim ligros klal lo. Eliyesh ligros. what should be the right girsa? I think it should say afilu tuva nami lo. We shouldn't allow so much. Inami lidachis. And now the Gemara wants to take it in the other direction, that maybe there's more of a reason to be mekil and permit hasholas peres min agag even in a larger quantity. Because Hasamayna time on Shabbos, we're only going to allow you up to 4 or 5. The lekef said mama, because you're not in a vulnerable situation to take a financial loss. When the rains are coming down on Yontif, he can say mama nafilu tuvanami. We can even be more mekil on Yontif as far as Mashilin and allow for a greater volume.